Audio Jungle.
Have fun. If you mess up, laugh at yourself. Hey everybody, welcome to the last month in our Ruler Mastery series. I hope that you've had an amazing time and have learned a bunch of new techniques. I'm sure that your quilts are looking great and that you have been practicing like crazy and just really getting good at your skills and your designs. So today we're going to be working with the Baby Jane ruler, which is a clamshell ruler on one side, then kind of a wavy edge on the other. So we're going to be using both edges for this final lesson. And we're going to be relying upon the grid etch line that's on the ruler. We're going to line that up with the etch line that we're going to be pouncing with the chalk pounce pad in the areas that are remaining. So we're going to have a great time. We're going to dive right into this. We're going to learn how to align this ruler to the grid marked either by the stencil, or if you've chosen to use a ruler with a marking implement, that works too. We're going to need a 3/4 inch grid for this ruler today, and we are going to be learning some really cool designs and a lot of different ways that you can use this ruler. And of course, they're not the only things you can do with it. If you come up with some other ideas, I always encourage sharing and tagging me through Facebook or Instagram and showing me what you've done. That makes me very happy. So let's go ahead and get started on our quilt. We're going to start working in sections 1C, so there's going to be a left and a right. We're going to need to create our registration lines first, because this particular ruler does rely upon having the registration lines that you're using to have that perfect spacing that you need and want for the clamshells. First, what we're going to do is just find our center point here of this section. So let's take a look here. We're just going to kind of find that center mark. So if we have 7 inches along this long edge, then we are going to mark at 3.5, and that's going to give us that center mark. Then we're going to draw the diagonal line to the corner, like so. So we have a diagonal line there. Then we're going to do the same thing with the left side of section 1C. Just draw that diagonal. Now we have a place to align the stencil to so that we can have the right amount of cutoff on the sides. We want that to be even because this is going to be a little bit bigger. And if you're using just a ruler and a pen or pencil, then you're just going to mark a 3/4 inch grid working out from that center line. And then let's go ahead, and we're going to be using, or I'm going to be using a chalk pounce pad to show you how this works. And just smooth that stencil around. Now we've got our grid marked, and that looks really nice. You can see that really well. So we're going to now do the same thing with that other side. We'll have 2 1C sections. And then again, just keep that center line on there. You can see through the stencil if you're using a stencil. Otherwise, just use your ruler and pencil. There we go. Now we've got our 2 sections marked with grids, 3/4 inch grids. Then we're going to be able to align our Baby Jane ruler to that grid, and we're going to have that perfect placement. So let's go ahead and get into using the ruler with the grid now. Always want to take your baggie of shelf liner pieces. With this particular ruler, I like to suggest 2 or 3 pieces of shelf liner at the bottom of the ruler because you really want the fabric to get nicely gripped so it can move along with you. And let's go ahead and work kind of working from the bottom up. And then you're going to want to kind of think about that center mark so that you end up either with a peak at the center or a valley at the center. So you want to kind of be mindful of that. And I'm going to go ahead and put the peak of the clamshell ruler, which is the kind of rounded upper portion. And I'm going to put that on that center line there. And I'm just gonna align the etch line on the ruler with the horizontal line, that's the lower portion of the triangle, and make sure that that grid line on that ruler stays lined up to the stencil mark. And there's gonna be a groove here, and when you go into that groove, your ruler foot is just gonna nest perfectly into that little groove of the ruler. And that's gonna end up aligning perfectly to that big portion of the triangle. So go ahead and slide your gripping aids underneath, like so. Have this all positioned the way you like it. The little ovals here, they're very small, and on this particular ruler, we're just gonna use them as a place for your fingertips to help you guide the ruler. Make sure you remember to lower your foot, and then you can take a few small locking stitches, and that's just gonna secure your thread, or you can pull your bobbin thread up and bury your thread. So that's entirely up to you. I'm going to lower my needle and make sure that I'm right on that previous seam. And I'm gonna take just a few small locking stitches because they're not gonna really go anywhere. And then I'm gonna start working through the clamshell design. So this is an outside edge tool where I'm just using that one edge of the tool. You can rotate your quilt a little bit if you need to have a better angle. And then you're just gonna, with your ruler, you're gonna be leaning up against the edge of that ruler foot. You'll go right into that groove, and once you're into that groove, you should be able to see that you're hitting that stitch line. And if you don't want to go extend past it, just kind of stop right at that stitch line. And then your peak of your clamshells should be just kind of grazing right across that line above. So I've gone ahead and done one row of scallops or clamshells, whatever you want to refer to them as. And I'm going to utilize this space here because my binding is going to go on that edge. So I can just kind of travel and work my way kind of out of that area, just working kind of off the quilt here. And what I want to do next is I want to realign the ruler with the grid by shifting it to the side so it's off, they're offset. So where I have a valley, this would be considered a valley, then I want a peak above. So now the peak is above the valley. And again, I just use those grids to align to the stencil. So ruler aligns to stencil. And then we're just gonna do that same process again. Now once we meet up with the peak below, we're gonna just kind of stop our quilting and transfer our weight to that next edge. So by transfer our weight, what I mean by that is we're leaning on this edge of the ruler now. So that's the edge we're leaning on. Remember to manage your bulk of your quilt by either folding your quilt up or elevating the edges of your quilt so that you're not having to kind of fight with the bulk or drag of your quilt. All right, so we've got the 2 rows of clamshells. And next what we want to do is continue working up, and I'm just going to kind of stitch along that seam line right there, as you can see. This would be an opportunity to cut your thread if you didn't want to see that backtracking, but I'm okay with it here. So I'm just going to keep traveling until I get up to that intersection point. Actually, I'm going to go a little bit further, and now I can align the ruler with the grid again. Once again, same technique, utilizing those ovals as a place for your fingers to just kind of help you guide and control. Leaning against just that outside edge. Okay, and now we're off the quilt again. So what we do is we just kind of travel out a little bit because that's your binding edge. And this is a really neat way to have just absolutely perfect clamshells, which these could be used if you wanted to do a neat roof with little shingles on it. You could turn the ruler upside down and all sorts of neat things if you wanted to do fish scales, that sort of thing. Now here, I'm just going to take a few small locking stitches and cut my thread, and that is really all we're gonna do for this particular section. So we're gonna cut our thread. Now the same exact thing is gonna happen on that other side, but I wanna give you just a quick variation that you can use if you'd like. Because there are a lot of neat things that you can do with this ruler, I want to make sure that you're really kind of thinking outside the box and using some free motion technique here and there. So let's get to this other side, and again we'll put the peak at the center and align it to the grid, which is really handy because as long as you're aligned to the grid, then you're in business. You're in good position to have that great spacing. Now the other option here is once you work into the valley portion of the clamshell, you can take and add a little free motion detail there. And what I'm doing is I'm also kind of taking advantage of the fact that I have those registration lines. And the registration line is really just, it's gonna give me that little dot. And right where I have those small dots, I can just take and kind of come up and add a little teardrop shape, or any other shape for that matter, that you want to incorporate. So it's just gonna give you details to incorporate. And then just keep on repositioning the ruler if need be. Like right there, you can see I'm a little off the grid there. So I would have wanted to kind of reposition it. But once the grid's removed, the nice thing is that your design looks absolutely perfect and you don't see that grid. So that's just gonna give you that really neat spacing and just kind of that perfect look. So that's all we're gonna do for section 1C, and now we're gonna move on and work in another triangular section. Okay, now we're gonna move on to sections 4C. There's gonna be 2 of those. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna use the clamshell baby Jane ruler to make circles. So this is a really fun technique to use the clamshells as a way to create really neat circle designs. So we're gonna do some marking here in these triangular sections by either using the 3/4 inch grid or using the stencil. So this is gonna be the 3/4 inch stencil here that came with the kit. It's just a little corner stencil, and we wanna mark that section. Now, we're gonna need to use a little bit more, so we're gonna need to drop this down a little bit so that we're able to have access to that longer row again. And just kind of, you can just see the dots kind of aligning to the previous row. And we just kind of move it over and just get a little bit more marking here so that we have the whole section completely marked with our grid. And there we go. Just really a swiping motion with the chalk pounce pad. Now we've got our grid, very nice and easy to see. Then essentially all we're doing here in this section is going to be rows of the clamshells that are parallel to one another, and then we're gonna flip the ruler the other way so that we're using the other side. So what I'm gonna do is start here in the center, and I'm gonna show you just kind of the gist of the design. So there's really not a wrong or right to this. You can get crazy with it if you want to add other free motion details with it. If you can see that you're gonna kind of run off the edge a little bit, utilize some of that space. As I've shown you in some of the previous videos, you can always do a little bit of free motion quilting to travel or to avoid backtracking. So let's do a little locking stitch. And then right here is where we're gonna kind of go off the edge there. So instead of backtracking, I'm just gonna do a little kind of stipple here until I meet back up with the ruler. And then remember to take your time. You don't need to be hurrying through. Make sure that none of your quilt is dragging down. That's gonna cause resistance with your quilting. And just kind of take your time and always make sure that your grid is lined up to your ruler. And work back all the way over to that next edge. Now what we're gonna do here is I'm just gonna kind of show you how this circle works. And now we can either, if you have a foot with a high enough shank, you can simply take and bring the ruler around to the back side of that ruler foot so that you're working now on the back edge. And you still want to go ahead and align the grid just like we've been doing, only now we're using the back edge of the foot. And then we're working into that groove. So this is going to give us those perfect circles. I have a little bit of my hand kind of on the quilt here, and that's just going to help me to easily maneuver the quilt. And if you feel like you didn't get quite to that valley, you can just do a little free motion quilting and then be on your way. Okay, and then be careful not to running it into your gripping aid there. And then we're just going to meet right back with our starting point. So that gives you a really cool kind of row of circles. And you can do them however you like. If you want them to overlap, you can plan it as such and just have some fun with it. So let's go ahead and just real quickly, we're going to quilt this up, and remember that you can always kind of do something a little bit different. You don't have to do it just like mine. And remember to just have fun with it. So let's go ahead and finish this up. Now we're going to move on to the sections 7C. So there's going to be 2 of those. And first we're going to want to mark that 3/4 inch grid again. And I wanted to give you another tip for working with stencils. So if you notice that your stencils kind of tend to slip around and your lines aren't as accurate as you'd like them to be, you can always take advantage of the little shelf liner again and place the little pieces of shelf liner just right underneath that stencil. And we're going to do the same thing here with this triangle. We're going to need to mark the smaller portion and then slide the stencil down. Remember that the motion that you're using with your chalk pounce pad is more of kind of a sweeping motion, so it's not exactly a pouncing motion. And you do really need to kind of beat the chalk pounce pad into kind of the lid just to get those chalk pieces kind of distributed through the fibers of the chalk pounce pad. So then just reposition the stencil here so that you can do that last little row. And on this design, we're going to be working on the other side of the ruler. So we're just going to get a really fun kind of wavy pattern, and there's just all sorts of really cool things that you can do with it. And this is just going to be one idea for you. We're going to do the same thing on the top and bottom. So I'm just going to show you one side so you can see how this works. And I just like having the grid because it really just gives you that place that you can align to perfectly. Now, when you're using this other side of the ruler, what you want to think about, if you want that kind of lower portion, or the way we're looking at it would be the upper, the peak of that wavy line. If you want that to just glide right along that stitch line there, then you want to align the dashed line of the ruler with that stitch line above, and that's going to give you that placement that you're looking for. And this is going to be my center, and I'm just making sure that I'm in line with the center. That way I know that my positioning is as it should be. We're going to put the gripping aids underneath. Make sure that we're aligned, so don't cover up your etch line with your gripping aids because you do want to make sure that you can see. And always be sure that when you close or drop your foot, your ruler is free of the foot itself, because if you lower your foot right on top of that acrylic, you might end up with a little bit of a disaster there. So take a few small locking stitches, make sure you're nice and aligned there, And then, so I'm just using this, I'm using kind of the back edge of my foot and leaning up against that ruler, and we'll see how this just kind of goes and stitches right over that line right where we want. And then we're just going to keep on quilting here. Make sure to kind of walk your hands down as needed so that you have the right amount of stabilization on your tool. And when you do want to walk and kind of reposition your hands, it's a good idea to stop your quilting. So now we're going to take the ruler and we're just going to flip it like this. And you can really kind of have some fun here and just kind of play with your positioning. What I did is just I'm coming down and just kind of exposing one row of grid right there. So we want to, again, just kind of drop the ruler down so that that dashed line is resting right on the stencil line there, and that the center is in line with the center of the triangle. And if we want to incorporate free motion quilting to travel down, we can. So you might just kind of decide to go ahead and use a little bit of free motion quilting working in this section. And I like to keep the gripping aids handy because I'll use these to do my little stippling or my little loops or my circles or whatever technique I'm using to kind of travel down to where that ruler is sitting and waiting for me. And then you can either use those same gripping aids underneath your ruler or just kind of keep them aside. Now we make sure that the dashed line is aligned to the horizontal line provided by the stencil. These little ovals are for your fingers just to kind of help you guide and work with that ruler. And just kind of lean. Now we're leaning against the front edge of the ruler foot. And have some fun with this. If you end up working to this section and you want to add some free motion quilting in that neat little design, that would look amazing. So you can only enhance. And then we're just going to keep on kind of repeating that design, and you can play with the grid and use it however you like to get the secondary designs that you're looking for. So we'll just keep on working through this triangle, and then you're just going to repeat that very same thing on the next 7C section there. So that concludes our Ruler Mastery series, and we wrapped it up with that baby Jane ruler, which I think you're gonna love. In the future, I'm hoping that you're gonna see a lot of potential using this ruler for borders, blocks, sashings, all sorts of cool things, and hopefully you're gonna see how versatile this tool is. I wanna just give you a big thank you for joining me and allowing me to teach you and share my techniques and my ideas with you, as well as giving you some really great tools that you can use. You should now have a really wonderful selection of tools that are going to be just a great toolbox for all of these quilting techniques that you're going to be using. And it's just a really kind of well-rounded selection of rulers that are going to just give you a lot of great options moving forward. So you should feel real comfortable now working with feathers and borders, block designs, learning how to simplify your blocks through using stencils or a ruler and a pen, just to kind of give yourself those registration lines. So all of these things are going to simplify the process for you. So we've had a wonderful 10 months together. If you want to stay connected with me to learn more, certainly you can visit me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and just continue learning from me and getting excited about the art of quilting. So everybody have a wonderful day, and thank you so much again for joining me.